The comms blared through the command center, a cacophony of panicked voices and urgent alerts. Commander Elena Ray stood at the central control station, her eyes scanning the rapidly shifting data streams on the holographic display. The Zevra fleet had arrived without warning. No prior contact, no warning signals, just sudden, overwhelming force. The reports from the outer colonies were already streaming in, each one more horrifying than the last. Mars's colony had been reduced to a smoldering crater, Titan's atmospheric generators wiped out, and Europa's underwater research station torn apart. "Elena," a voice called out behind her. Lieutenant James Knox, his uniform singed from the latest skirmish, stood in the doorway. His jaw was set, eyes hard but burning with the same resolve that had defined him since the day he first enlisted. "We can't sit here waiting for them to wipe us off the map. I say we strike back. Now." Elena turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "The fleet's outgunned, James. They have cloaking tech that makes it impossible to track them until they're already on top of us. We don't even know how many ships they have. Then we make them feel us," he snapped, his voice rising with the frustration of too many failed attempts. "If we wait for the perfect shot, they'll tear us apart. We can't play their game. We have to take the fight to them, Commander." Ray's mind raced. She had always been cautious, calculating. But Knox's words, his passion, rang with a certain truth. The enemy didn't respect them. No. They saw humanity as an obstacle, a nuisance to be eradicated. But they didn't understand humanity's spirit. Knox was right. They had to strike, no matter the odds. A plan began to form. "All right," Ray said, her voice calm but steely. "We won't wait for them to make the next move. We'll hit them where it hurts, even if we have to take heavy losses. Set up a diversionary strike against their fleet in the outer system. Knox, I'll need you on this one." Knox's grin was sharp, filled with that familiar fire. "I thought you'd never ask. We'll show them what happens when you underestimate humanity." A cold silence fell over the command center as Ray gave the final orders. Moments later, a fleet of smaller, fast response ships was dispatched, including the Vanguard, the lead assault vessel she would command. The plan was simple: attack in force, but fast and unpredictable. The Zevra were powerful, yes, but they relied on their cloaking tech to keep them one step ahead. It was time to turn that weakness into an advantage. As the fleet moved into position, Ray stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, her gaze unwavering as she observed the shifting stars through the viewport. "We've lost colonies. We've lost lives. But we will not lose our will. Not today." Suddenly, the alert flashed. "Zevra ships detected," the operator called out. "Multiple signatures. They've decloaked." Knox's voice crackled through her comms. "Time to show them why they should have stayed in their corner of the galaxy, Commander." With a nod, Ray gave the order. The fleet surged forward, each ship cloaked in the human ingenuity that had saved them before, the unpredictable, audacious will to fight when every other option was exhausted. As the first Zevra ships loomed on the horizon, Ray felt a surge of adrenaline. This was no longer just about survival. This was about proving that humanity would never go quietly into the night. The Vanguard surged forward, cutting through the blackness of space with a newfound urgency. Around Ray, the bridge crew moved with a synchronized intensity, the hum of systems working overtime as they prepared for battle. The Zevra fleet had decloaked far too close, and the first salvo from their ships had already torn through one of Earth's outer defenses, one of the last orbital stations still standing. "Commander," the tactical officer called, voice tight, "we have incoming. Zevra ships decloaking in formations. Looks like they've split into squads. We're outnumbered." Ray didn't flinch. "We knew we'd be outnumbered. We only need to buy time." "Time for what?" Knox's voice came through the comms, sharp and clipped. He was already in the thick of it, piloting a fighter craft on a direct intercept course toward the nearest enemy ship. The Vanguard's cannons fired in quick succession, adding fire to the chaos around them. "To make sure they know humanity won't break," Ray replied, her voice steady. "We fight on our terms. Hit them hard and fast, then retreat into the asteroid belt. Use the terrain. Get them off their game." Nox laughed grimly. "Always a pleasure to dance with a bigger partner, huh? Let's do this." The first volley of Zevra plasma shots streaked toward the Vanguard, narrowly missing the ship's shields. The bridge crew jolted as the impact rattled the hull. Another hit came seconds later, but the shields held steady. For now. "Brace for impact." Ray barked, gripping the console as the enemy forces closed in. The tactical officer fired a series of shots from the ship's massive cannons, blasting a Zevra destroyer out of formation. The debris scattered in all directions, but the Zevra ships quickly regrouped, their swarming tactics making it difficult to land another solid hit. Outside, Nox's fighter zipped between the Zevra warships, his ship cloaked in human technology, making it nearly invisible. The Zevra fighters, sleek, angular ships, were fast and relentless, but they weren't ready for the unpredictability of human tactics. Nox weaved through enemy fire, his heart pounding in time with his pulse, dodging energy blasts that narrowly missed. He darted toward a lone enemy cruiser, firing his torpedoes in quick succession. The Zevra ship exploded in a brilliant flash of blue light. "Nice shot, Nox," one of the Vanguard's officers called out, but Ray's face remained set. This small victory wasn't enough. "We're not here for small victories," she muttered to herself, eyes tracking the holographic display of the battle. The Zevra were relentless. More ships were decloaking, emerging from stealth faster than they could be taken down. "Commander," the communications officer called, "we've got a priority message from Earth's Central Command. They want to know if we need reinforcements." Ray hesitated. Sending reinforcements would deplete Earth's last remaining resources, leaving the planet vulnerable to a direct Zevra strike. They couldn't afford to expose Earth's defenses like that, not when the homeworld was a potential target. "We'll make it on our own," she said firmly. "Tell them to prepare for the worst. We'll fight until we can't anymore." Just as she spoke, a massive explosion rocked the Vanguard. A Zevra warship had managed to slip past their defenses, launching a devastating barrage at close range. The ship's hull groaned as another round of plasma struck. The lights flickered, and for a split second, Ray feared the worst. "Status report," she shouted, gripping her seat as the ship veered slightly off course. "We've lost the starboard shield, but we're holding steady," the tactical officer reported. "Hull integrity at 65%. Ray's jaw tightened. The Vanguard could hold, but not forever. They needed to make a decisive move before the Zevra pressed their advantage too hard. "Nox, we need you back. Fall back to the asteroid belt. Now." There was no response. Ray's heart skipped a beat. "Nox," she called again, her voice rising with urgency. Finally, his voice crackled through the comms, a grin evident in his tone despite the chaos. "Sorry, Commander, I was just making sure our new friends don't forget their manners. I'll be right behind you. You're not getting rid of me that easily." Ray exhaled in relief, but she knew that the battle was far from won. The asteroid belt was their only chance for a quick escape, a place where the Zevra couldn't track them as easily. The Vanguard shot toward the asteroid field, the ship's engines roaring. Behind them, the Zevra ships pursued relentlessly, determined to finish what they had started. Ray's mind raced. This was it. They could either survive or die here. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Ray commanded, her voice steely as she turned to face the crew. "This isn't over yet." The Vanguard plunged into the asteroid field, a jagged maze of rock and debris that had once served as a hiding place for smugglers and pirates. Now it was humanity's last hope. The Zevra fleet, though relentless, had not yet learned how to navigate this labyrinth with the same deadly precision they employed in open space. "Engage cloaking," Ray commanded. The order was issued in a quiet, grim tone, as she eyed the approaching Zevra ships on the tactical display. Their fleet was slowing as they attempted to adjust to the new environment, but Ray knew it would only be a matter of time before they adapted. She needed a plan, and fast. Knox's voice broke through the silence. "I'm good to go, Commander. Just need a second to." The ship shuddered again as another round of Zevra plasma struck the Vanguard's rear shields. This time, it was more than just a warning shot. The ship groaned in protest as a section of the rear hull flickered dangerously on the display. "Now, Knox," Ray ordered, the words clipped and sharp. A burst of static filled the comms as Knox's voice responded. "I'm on it." With a sudden jolt, the fighter pod detached from the Vanguard, and Ray watched as the small, nimble craft darted into the shadow of an asteroid, disappearing from sight. It was one of the last remaining fighters that hadn't been destroyed or heavily damaged in the first wave. Knox's pilot instincts would give him an edge in the asteroid field, but he couldn't do it alone. "Commander," the tactical officer said urgently, "we've got Zevra ships closing in on our position. They're spreading out, trying to corner us." Ray's mind raced. If the Zevra realized they were using the asteroid field to hide, they would adjust their tactics and flush them out. They needed to create a diversion, something to slow the Zevra down and give Knox the chance to do his job. She needed an answer. It was then that the message arrived, an encrypted signal, weak and garbled. "Commander Ray," the voice on the other end said, a familiar accent cutting through the distortion. "This is Krill. I have important information that could change the course of this war, but it will come at a cost. You need to hear me out." Ray froze. Krill. The name echoed in her mind like a distant warning bell. Krill was one of the defectors, a high-ranking Zevra officer who had mysteriously vanished after the initial wave of attacks. He had been a key figure in the alien forces, known for his ruthlessness. Why was he reaching out now? "Commander, you need to listen," Krill's voice continued, his tone urgent but oddly calm. "You're running out of options. The Zevra have a weakness, one they'd been hiding for years. But unless you act fast, it will be too late." Ray's fingers drummed on the console as she processed the information. She didn't trust Krill. He had defected, yes, but for all she knew, he could be leading them into a trap. Yet something in his voice, something in the urgency of the message, told her it was real. The Zevra had a weakness, and they needed to know it. "We'll need more than just words," she said cautiously. "What do you want in exchange for this information?" There was a pause on the other end. "Sanctuary. For me and my people. Once the Zevra are defeated, we want a place in the new world you're building. Only then will I give you the full details." Ray's grip tightened on the armrest. It was a dangerous gamble, but with humanity on the brink of annihilation, she knew they had no choice. The plan had to work. "I'll give you sanctuary," Ray said, her voice firm. "But we're on the clock. Krill, if your information pans out, you'll have your safe haven. If it's a trap, I'll personally see to it that you regret it." The transmission clicked off abruptly, leaving Ray staring at the screen in silence. Was she making a mistake? Could she trust him? "We don't have time to waste," she muttered, turning to the tactical officer. "Prepare the next phase of the plan. We need to disrupt the Zevra's communications. Now." Just as she finished issuing the order, the comms came alive with Knox's voice, crackling through the static. "Commander, I've got something. The Zevra fleet. They're coordinating using a central command signal, something I think we can jam. If we take that down, their coordination will fall apart. I'll need a few more minutes to find the right spot." Ray smiled grimly. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. "Do it, Knox," she said. "Make it count." The Vanguard was shrouded in silence as it drifted deeper into the asteroid field, the ship's engines humming low as the crew braced for the next phase of their plan. Outside, the Zevra fleet was still in pursuit, though their coordination was faltering after Knox's successful jamming of their central command. Ray's fingers tightened on the armrest of her seat as the tension in the air seemed to thicken, the outcome of the battle hanging on a knife's edge. "Nox, what's your status?" Ray's voice was calm, but edged with urgency. They were running out of time. The asteroid field was a temporary refuge, but the Zevra wouldn't remain confused for long. They'd adapt. They always adapted. A burst of static followed before Nox's familiar voice crackled through the comms, rough with static but determined. "I'm closing in on their command vessel. I've pinpointed their communication relay. I've got one shot at this. Just need a little more cover from you guys." Ray glanced at the holographic display, watching as the remaining Zevra ships moved in tight formation. Their cloaking tech re-engaged, making them nearly invisible. They had already begun to adapt, closing the gap between themselves and the Vanguard. "Get out of there, Nox," Ray ordered, her voice laced with urgency. "You're going to be exposed if they detect you." "Just need a few more minutes, Commander," he responded, determination in his voice. "You know the drill." She cursed under her breath, knowing all too well that Nox wasn't about to abandon his mission. "Not now. Not after everything that had happened." "I don't like it," she muttered, "but fine. Make it quick. We'll hold them off for as long as we can." With the jamming signal still in place, the Vanguard launched another flurry of defensive shots toward the nearest Zevra warship. The enemy's return fire was savage, the energy blasts searing past them with deadly precision. Every move was calculated, but Ray could feel the walls closing in. The Zevra were learning. They would soon find a way through their defenses. A loud bang shook the hull. The ship rocked again as another Zevra vessel managed to land a direct hit. The shield systems flickered, dropping down to 40% capacity. The countdown had begun. "Commander, we've got a breach in the starboard hull," the tactical officer shouted. "We're losing pressure in Sector 4. Recommend immediate evacuation." Ray's eyes locked onto the tactical map. The Zevra had pierced the Vanguard's defenses at the exact point where their main engines were located. If that section failed, they wouldn't be able to escape the asteroid field in time. She was left with no choice. "Seal off Sector 4, she snapped. "We won't be losing anyone today." Despite the quick response, Ray could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The clock was ticking, and their options were running out. "Nox, I don't care what it takes. You need to finish the job. We won't last much longer," she ordered through gritted teeth, her resolve hardening. Seconds later, Nox's voice rang through the comms once again, quieter this time. "I'm in position. This is it. I'm going to hit their relay. Once I do, their fleet will be a mess. The rest is up to you, Commander." Ray felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She knew what he was about to do. He was going to get close enough to trigger an EMP burst right into the heart of the enemy fleet's communications, but it meant Nox would be exposed, a sitting target. And that wasn't a risk she was willing to take. "Nox, you don't have to do this," she called, her voice softer this time, pleading. "We can get you out of there." The line crackled, then his voice returned, steady and sure. "Commander, I've always known the risks, but this is bigger than me. It's bigger than all of us. If I can't finish this, Earth is done. We'll all be done. I'll see you on the other side." Before she could reply, the comms went dead. Silence. Ray slammed her fist into the console, her heart hammering in her chest. The Vanguard's hull groaned again as another Zevra ship unloaded a volley of fire in their direction, but Ray had already made her decision. They were no longer running. They were fighting. "All units," Ray barked. "We're going in. Full speed ahead. We fight for Nox and for humanity." With that, the Vanguard lurched forward, the bridge lights flickering as the ship surged through the asteroid field, lasers and energy blasts illuminating the darkness around them. As they charged, Ray's thoughts were with Nox, and with the uncertain future of humanity's resistance. The Vanguard ripped through the asteroid field, its hull buckling under the strain of constant impact. Every moment felt like a ticking clock, each second more critical than the last. Commander Ray's pulse raced as the ship shot through narrow gaps in the field, weaving in and out of jagged rocks and debris, while the Zevra fleet chased relentlessly, closing in with terrifying precision. "Shields are at 30%. The tactical officer called out, her voice strained. "Hull integrity is holding. But for how much longer?" "Hold steady," Ray snapped, gripping the armrest tightly. "We're not done yet." The bridge crew worked in silence, each member a cog in a machine that was slowly grinding its way towards something bigger. Every moment, every action was crucial. Ray could feel the tension tightening in her chest as she waited for the moment when their final gamble would pay off. "Knox," she called, her voice steady, but tinged with desperation. "We're going to need that EMP. Now." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The comms buzzed with static, and Ray's heart skipped a beat, but then his voice broke through, crackling but clear. "I'm in position. I've locked onto the relay. I'm sending the signal now." The Vanguard shuddered violently as an explosion of light flashed across the battlefield. A massive pulse of energy ripped through the vacuum of space, the EMP wave crashing against the Zevra fleet's communication systems. Ships staggered, their coordinated movements faltering. The once synchronized assault turned into chaos as their lines broke apart, individual ships careening off course, unable to communicate with one another. The Zevra were momentarily disoriented. "Commander," the comms officer cried out. "It's working. Their command structure is compromised. We've got a window of opportunity." Ray's eyes narrowed. This was their chance. "Take it. Engage the fleet. Focus fire on the nearest destroyer. If we can take that down, we can create a hole in their ranks." The crew responded with immediate efficiency, redirecting the Vanguard's firepower. The massive energy cannons on the ship's flanks discharged with brutal precision, unleashing torrents of plasma at the nearest Zevra warship. The targeted destroyer's shields flickered under the barrage before cracking, and with a violent detonation, it exploded, sending shockwaves through the surrounding ships. "Direct hit, Commander," the tactical officer reported, her voice laced with disbelief. "The Zevra ship is gone." But the battle was far from over. The remaining Zevra ships, though scattered, quickly began to regroup, adapting to the new chaos with terrifying efficiency. They were a relentless force, and Ray knew they couldn't afford to slow down. "We've got incoming," the sensor officer warned. 3 Zevra warships closing in fast. Ray's eyes locked onto the strategic display. The Zevra were adjusting their tactics, funneling their remaining ships toward them. They were no longer disorganized. They were rallying for a final push. It was now or never. "Evacuate non-essential personnel from Sector 4, Ray ordered. "Prepare for boarding defense." "Commander," the tactical officer said, sounding cautious, "if we hold our position here, we'll be a sitting target. We're exposed." Ray's jaw tightened. She knew the risks, but they didn't have the luxury of retreat. "Move us in closer to the remaining fleet," she said. "Get us in their blind spot. If they can't see us, they can't target us." The Vanguard's engines roared to life once more as the ship veered sharply toward the remnants of the Zevra fleet, angling itself to take advantage of the gaps in their formation. The remaining Zevra ships were attempting to regroup, but Ray knew their response would be too slow to prevent the next wave of destruction. "Braced for impact," Ray called, gripping her console as the ship surged forward at full speed. The next few moments were a blur of fire and chaos. The Vanguard unleashed another barrage of shots, ripping through the hulls of 2 smaller Zevra vessels as they scrambled to get into position. The Vanguard bucked and shuddered as it absorbed hits, but Ray's mind was focused solely on the mission. She wouldn't allow humanity's last hope to falter now. Not after everything they'd sacrificed. A loud explosion rattled the ship again, but this time, the Vanguard didn't falter. The last Zevra destroyer fell, its destruction lighting up the field like a star dying in the cold void of space. "We've taken them down, Commander," the tactical officer announced, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Their fleet is broken." For a moment, Ray allowed herself a single, fleeting breath of relief. But she knew this wasn't over. The Zevra were a relentless species. They would return. But for now, they had won. "Not yet," Ray said, her voice cold with resolve. "Prepare for the next wave. This fight is far from over." The Vanguard hovered in the stillness of space, surrounded by the wreckage of the Zevra fleet. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the cacophony of explosions and the roar of battle just moments ago. The crew, exhausted but determined, stood in tense anticipation, awaiting any sign of the next threat. The destruction of the Zevra ships had been a decisive blow, but Ray knew better than to assume the battle was won. "Report," Ray commanded, her voice steady but strained. Her eyes scanned the holographic displays, watching as the remnants of the Zevra fleet drifted like shattered glass in the void. Their tactics had faltered, and their fleet had been broken, but there were too many unknowns, too many dangers still lurking. "Shields are down to 15%, the tactical officer replied, her voice tight. "We're holding, but barely. Hull integrity is compromised in multiple sections. We're going to need repairs before we can move again." Ray nodded, absorbing the information. The Vanguard had taken more damage than they had expected. It was a miracle they were still afloat. She turned to the comms officer. "Anything from Knox?" The silence on the comms was heavy, and for a moment, Ray feared the worst. But then, Knox's voice crackled through, faint but clear. "Commander, I'm still here," he said, his tone grim but determined. "EMP pulse worked as planned. I've disabled their communications for now, but their forces are regrouping, just not the way they expected. I'm taking a bit of a detour, but I'm coming back to you." Ray's heart skipped a beat. She had feared the worst, but hearing his voice was like a lifeline. Knox had always been their most daring pilot. If anyone could make it back, it was him. "You've got minutes, Knox," she said firmly. "We don't have much time before they adapt. Get back to the Vanguard and prepare to defend yourself." "I'm on it," he replied with a small laugh that barely masked the tension in his voice. "I'll make it. Just don't go getting yourselves killed without me." Ray allowed herself a brief smile, the first in hours. "We'll be here. Just hurry up." The comms went silent again, and Ray returned her focus to the task at hand. The Zevra were not done. They had been thrown into disarray, but the warlords who commanded them would not be easily swayed. If they had to regroup, they would come back stronger, more focused. Ray knew they needed to be prepared for whatever came next. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from Earth," the comms officer reported. "It's high priority." Ray hesitated. Earth's command had been a lifeline, but she knew they were still vulnerable. Earth's defenses had been weakened by the initial Zevra assault, and they couldn't afford to lose any more resources. She was about to decline the transmission when the officer added, "It's from General Moreau." At the mention of Moreau's name, Ray's posture stiffened. General Moreau was one of the few remaining high-ranking officials in Earth's defense forces, and his reputation for pragmatism and calculated decision-making had earned him both respect and fear. "Patch it through," Ray ordered, her voice hard. The screen flickered, and General Moreau's weathered face appeared, his expression grim but determined. "Commander Ray," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "we've received intel on a potential Zevra reinforcements fleet heading toward Earth. We've got a small window to fortify defenses, but we need your fleet to assist. We're running out of time." Ray felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. They couldn't afford to abandon Earth, her home, humanity's last bastion. But the Vanguard's resources were stretched thin. The Vanguard was humanity's last weapon, and if it fell, so would the fight. "We're barely holding together up here, General," she said, her voice tight with the strain of leadership. "We need repairs. The Vanguard can't move at full capacity. I understand, Morrow replied. But if you don't assist, we won't last. You'll have to make the call. The transmission cut off before Ray could respond, leaving her with a gut-wrenching choice. She stared out at the stars, the shattered remains of the Zevra fleet drifting in the distance. If they didn't act quickly, Earth would be lost. If they left the battlefield now, the Zevra would regroup and strike at their homeworld. They could lose everything. Helm, Ray said, her voice steady despite the weight of the decision. Plot a course to Earth. We're going to give them everything we've got. A moment of silence passed before the tactical officer replied. Course plotted, Commander. We're ready. Do it, Ray commanded, her mind already racing through the consequences. The Vanguard wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's resilience. They couldn't afford to fail now. The Vanguard's engines hummed to life once more, and the ship moved forward, leaving the wreckage of the Zevra fleet behind. Whatever awaited them on Earth, Ray knew one thing for certain. They had fought too hard to give up now. The cost of victory had been steep, but they would pay it willingly if it meant survival. The Vanguard cut through the blackness of space, its engines roaring as it set a course toward Earth. Ray stood at the command console, her eyes locked on the view ahead. Behind her, the bridge crew worked in a tense, focused silence. The ship was battered, its systems strained to the limit after the grueling battle with the Zevra fleet, and every member of the crew was acutely aware that they were operating on borrowed time. ETA to Earth's orbit. 45 minutes, the navigation officer reported, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's failing systems. Ray nodded but didn't respond. She didn't need to hear the countdown. She could feel the weight of it in every breath she took, each one heavy with the realization that this could be humanity's last chance. If they didn't succeed in repelling the Zevra reinforcements, Earth would fall. And without Earth, there would be no future. Commander, the tactical officer's voice broke into her thoughts. I've been analyzing the Zevra fleet's behavior. They've adapted. Their reinforcements will be more organized, better coordinated. They know we're coming, and they're preparing for a full-scale counterattack. Ray's jaw clenched. Of course they were. The Zevra were nothing if not relentless. We won't get another opportunity like this, the officer continued. We need to prepare for the worst. Ray looked over the tactical displays, which flickered as the ship's power levels fluctuated. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and running on fumes. But they had one advantage: the element of surprise. If they could strike first, they might be able to tip the scales in their favor. Get me an update on Nox, Ray ordered, turning to the comms officer. The comms officer hesitated before responding, her voice tight. Commander, I can't reach him. His signal's still bouncing in and out. Ray's heart skipped a beat. Nox had been a crucial part of their victory so far. If they lost him now, they would lose their edge, their only chance at disrupting the Zevra's command structure. Her thoughts flashed back to their last conversation. She knew he wasn't someone who would give up easily, but this was different. Keep trying, Ray said, her voice steely. He'll make it back. He has to. The crew fell into a tense, quiet rhythm as the Vanguard closed in on Earth's orbit. But the countdown was growing ever more urgent. Soon, they would be in range of the Zevra reinforcements, and the battle would reach its breaking point. Suddenly, the ship's proximity alarms blared. Multiple contacts incoming. The sensor officer called out, her voice laced with alarm. Zevra reinforcements. They've already deployed, too fast for us to intercept. Ray's mind raced. The Vanguard was too far from Earth's defenses to provide any real support. They were isolated, vulnerable. The enemy's fleet was larger, more prepared, and faster than anything they had anticipated. Prepare for combat, Ray ordered sharply, her voice cutting through the panic. We'll take the fight to them. No hesitation. Focus all fire on their flagship. If we can take that down, the rest of their fleet will fall apart. The crew worked with grim determination, their focus razor-sharp as they readied their weapons. Rey's hands tightened into fists at her sides as she watched the fleet materialize on the tactical display. The Zevra ships loomed large, their dark silhouettes growing as they came closer. "Brace for impact," the tactical officer warned as the first wave of enemy fire began to streak toward them. The vanguard lurched as the shields absorbed the first round of fire, but Rey could feel the strain of their battered defenses. This wasn't the same vanguard that had driven back the first wave of the Zevra assault. This was a wounded ship, its crew exhausted, and its resources stretched thin. But there was no turning back now. "All hands, engage," Rey shouted. "This is our final stand. For Earth, for humanity." The ship's cannons roared to life, blasting through the void with blistering intensity. The vanguard launched a flurry of energy blasts that collided with the leading Zevra ships, sending them careening off course. But the enemy didn't falter. Their fire was merciless, relentless, and for every Zevra ship they took down, 2 more seemed to take its place. Suddenly, the comms crackled, and Nox's voice came through, faint but unmistakable. "Commander, I'm back," he said, breathless and pained. "Just in time. I've got a line on their flagship's weak spot. You'll want to hit it now, while I've got their systems locked down." Rey's heart surged with a mix of relief and renewed determination. Nox was back, and they had one last shot. "Hold on, Nox," Rey called. "We're going in. Everyone, focus all fire on the flagship. This is it." With a final deafening roar, the vanguard surged toward the heart of the enemy fleet, locking onto the Zevra flagship. It was their last chance. If they failed, everything would be lost. The vanguard was a bruised and battered beast, but it surged forward, driven by the will of its crew and the unrelenting determination of Commander Rey. The flagship of the Zevra fleet loomed ahead, its colossal silhouette black against the backdrop of Earth's distant, fragile glow. This was it. The decisive moment. It was now or never. "Nox, can you lock in that weak point?" Rey asked, her voice calm despite the intensity of the moment. "I've got it, Commander." Nox's voice came through the comms, clear and steady despite the interference. "Targeting coordinates are locked. I'm disabling their shields. You've got a clean shot. Make it count." Rey's eyes narrowed as she glanced at the tactical display. The Zevra flagship was surrounded by its remaining escorts, their weapons ready, their shields brimming with energy. It was a fortress, and yet Nox had found the crack in the armor. A single vulnerability they could exploit, but they had one shot, one chance to end this before the enemy could adapt. "Helm, full speed ahead," Rey ordered, her voice sharp as a blade. "Bring us into range." The ship's engines roared to life as the vanguard blasted forward, closing the gap between them and the flagship. Every second felt like a lifetime. Enemy fire lashed out, streaking through the void, but the vanguard darted and weaved, its damaged systems still somehow holding up, its shields barely holding the barrage at bay. The vanguard's cannons whined as they powered up, their deadly barrels trained on the flagship's exposed weak point. The enemy ships around it swarmed, desperate to protect their leader, but Rey and her crew were focused. They wouldn't let themselves be distracted. They couldn't. Firing in 3, 2, 1. The voice of the weapons officer was barely audible over the ship's roar, but Rey didn't need the countdown. She could feel it in her bones. This was the moment they'd been fighting for. The vanguard's cannons unleashed a torrent of energy, a concentrated blast of pure power that struck the flagship's weak spot dead on. The impact was deafening, sending shockwaves through the fabric of space. For a brief moment, everything went still. Then, the flagship's shields flickered violently before completely failing, and the ship's hull began to break apart in a spectacular chain reaction. Rey's breath caught in her chest as she watched. The flagship, the symbol of the Zevra's might, began to disintegrate under the vanguard's assault, its core exploding in a brilliant flash of light. The surrounding Zevra ships, thrown into disarray, began to scatter, their command structure completely shattered. "Flagship down," the tactical officer reported, her voice filled with awe. "They're breaking formation. Their fleet's collapsing." Ray allowed herself a fleeting moment of relief, but it was quickly replaced by the cold reality of their situation. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. "Stay on them," Ray ordered. "We got to finish what we started. Take out as many as we can before they regroup." The crew moved with precision, their exhaustion momentarily forgotten as they focused their energy on the remaining Zevra ships. Every shot, every strike was a final act of defiance, a testament to the resolve of humanity. The Vanguard cut through the chaos, relentless in its pursuit of victory. But just as the last Zevra ship was brought down, a deep rumble echoed throughout the Vanguard. The ship's systems flickered, and alarms blared across the bridge. "Commander, we got a critical breach in the core," the engineering officer yelled. "Power levels are dropping. We can't sustain this much longer." Ray's heart sank. The Vanguard had endured more than any ship ever should. But it had done its duty. It had brought them this far. Initiating the emergency shutdown procedures, Ray called, her voice steady despite the storm raging around them. "Prepare to abandon ship." The crew moved swiftly, knowing that their survival now depended on getting to the escape pods. The Vanguard had done its job. They had won, but at a cost. Ray remained at her post for just a moment longer, looking out at the remnants of the Zevra fleet as it disintegrated into the dark void. Earth was safe. Humanity had been given a second chance, but she knew that this victory, hard-won and bitter, came at a price they would never forget. The ship's lights flickered once more, and Ray turned, giving one last glance at the bridge. Her people had fought with everything they had. They had given their all, not just for survival, but for something more, for a future. With a final, determined breath, Ray left the bridge, following her crew to the escape pods, knowing that the battle was over, but the war for humanity's future was just beginning.